Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we're going to talk about the 10 pint price. We're going to talk about fighters, and we're going to talk about The Northman 2022. So The Northman is an exciting new movie. It's really spectacular movie, 5 out of 5 stars, and I think it's every Dungeon Master content, every Dungeons & Dragons player content to understand Dungeons & Dragons and understand the deepest aspects of philosophy that exist within Dungeons & Dragons. Dungeons & Dragons is one of the most amorphous enigmas that has ever existed. It was born in 1974, and since that day, there's been huge debate, huge conversation around what Dungeons and Dragons is, right? And that's not debatable because a lot of people in the 80s were like, "Oh, this is an occult game. This is a tool of the occult." Right? So I say today that Dungeons and Dragons is something that Gary Gygax crafted, that it was a human improvement engine crafted by Gary Gygax and disguised as a game. That really the reality is that Dungeons and Dragons is actually the next rung on human intellectual evolution, right? That's a unique view. So me saying, "Hey, Dungeons and Dragons is this," right? But in the 80s, there were literally millions of people, low millions of people saying Dungeons and Dragons is a tool of the occult, right? So I'm not the first person to come along and say, hey, Dungeons and Dragons is X, right? And it's not a game, right? There's a long, and it goes much further than that. There's a long line, right? So of people saying, hey, Dungeons and Dragons, what is this thing? Let's talk about it. Let's get to the base nature, right? So I saw The Northman, spoilers for The Northman in this content. So The Northman is absolutely key for every Dungeon Master to go see this thing and view it, and every Dungeons & Dragons player to go see it and go view it. And the reason why is you cannot understand the fighter without seeing this film, right? And the reason why is it's a little complex, but so follow me here, right? So The Northman shows what melee combat really looks like. This is a very high in-depth, detailed look at melee combat from a culture, the Vikings, that took melee combat really, really seriously, right? And they did melee combat in a way that no other culture did, right? One, they rode their own boats, which gave them incredible speed. Two, when they went into battle, and all this is shown in the film, right? They rode their own boats, which gave them more speed, more power than most other fighters, right? Actually, than any other fighters, right? I don't think the Vikings were matched until the samurai. Okay, they were matched with the samurai, but the Vikings are literally one of the top 2 cultures in the world to have mastered melee combat, right? Excuse me. So you have this situation where the Vikings are doing their thing, right? And so they gain all this strength, and then when they go into battle, the film shows this, they would have these sessions the night before, or even the night before, and they would use psychology, right, and worship to put themselves in the state of a feral animal, specifically a wolf, right? And so they were binding psychology and physicality, their physical body. They were saying, we don't go into battle. We're like, oh, let's go take over this village today. You ready, Bob? They didn't do that. They were like, they howled like dogs. Like they put themselves into a state, a psychological state of furor and murder, right? And brought that energy, that psyche to the battlefield, right? And this is all shown in the film, right? And then when they arrived on the battlefield, they're there without a lot of armor, right? And they're using specific tactics and specific movement and specific attacks that really transformed melee combat in a way that you just don't see. Like, we've never seen melee combat depicted the way it's depicted in the Northman. And when you see it, your idea of the fighter will be transformed forever. The Dungeons and Dragons fighter will be transformed forever. Because what you're realizing is, we go into this, into Dungeons and Dragons, and we play these fighters, And we forget every time that that the fighter, more than any other class, is paying the 10 pint price, a pint at the time, and then having it restored by the cleric, right? And this is a different mindset. This is a different journey, right? And that the fighter is literally paying the price of victory with their blood, with their meat, with their bone, with everything they have. They're not sitting back, right, like a rogue, throwing some daggers. They're not sitting back like a mage, casting a fireball, right? They don't have a god to protect them the way the cleric does. Unlike every other class, okay, the fighter pays the price of victory a pint at a time. And that pint comes out of them and goes onto the ground, and nothing they do is like any other class, and we treat it lightly in the game because we don't understand it, and Northman explains it. If you're a Dungeon Master, you have to see this film. If you're a player who plays a fighter, you have to see this film. If you are a player and you have a fighter next to you in your game, you owe them respect for their play of that character in a different way than you currently understand, and you'll understand it once you have seen the Northman. If you are a Dungeon Master or a Dungeons & Dragons player over the 18, get to this film on the big screen. Do not see this thing on the small screen, and if you dare to see this on the small screen, do not dare to claim you saw it. You did not. Get to see this thing before it's out of theaters. It's important, right? Or just admit you're a shuffler and you're really not dedicated to Dungeons & Dragons, which is, if that's what you are, it's best to just admit it. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking, subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.